Welcome, everybody, back to the podcast for Industrial Insights. I got Keyan Bazargan with me of Iron Margin, not Iron Maiden, not Iron Man. And we're talking about what brands have to know, or challenges that brand founders have when they're trying to figure out their direct-to-consumer shipping and like how to optimize that. And so Keyan's in that space, and in our never-ending quest of learning 3PLs and outsourcing, that seems like something that is continuing to be a hot topic and something you can't ignore. Like, that's part of the growth phase and scale. So, Keyan, I appreciate you being here, and thank you for spending time today.
Thank you. Yeah, really excited to be here and talk.
And you're local, thankfully, not in Atlanta or Chicago. So I love having some SoCal natives on the show. That's great. And then you just did a San Diego talk for some students.
I did. Yeah, so San Diego State, I actually have a friend who's a student there, and he reached out to the professor. He told him, about my position, what I do, and got the opportunity to speak in front of 150 or so students they're all supply chain students studying business at SDSU. I think a lot of them were in their junior year. So wanted to give them a practical perspective on supply chain and also share some of the paths of getting into the industry. My path was definitely windy. I actually graduated from college and joined an insurance tech company and slowly made my way over to supply chain. My next gig was actually being in person at a commercial print warehouse, and that's when I finally got familiar with,
You got
supply
in the
chain in
building.
general.
Yeah, you got
Yeah,
in the four
exactly.
walls.
I was, when I actually went and interviewed with the company and walked around that building, coming from a tech background, I was so happy and excited to be somewhere tangible and not only be with people in person, but actually making things was like very refreshing. So with a lot of those students, wanted to provide them a perspective, like share what I'm doing, and really just share the perspective that there's so many job types in the supply chain, whether you're working in a warehouse, whether you're operating machinery, whether you're doing, more analytics work like I'm doing, or negotiations. Like, there's so many places for people to fit in, and I think it's a really fascinating ecosystem.
Yeah, imagine getting started today. Like, my kids are 10 and 12, so it's so funny. Of like, what do you want to do? How much do you want to follow in the footsteps of mom or dad? And could you, even if you wanted to, because the path is different than it was when we walked it. So you got AI lurking over everybody's
Yeah.
shoulders that might make you worry about jobs and what they're going to look like. So yeah, it is quite interesting to see people like a junior year. What was some of your advice you gave them?
Some of the advice was, I'd say number one, like, just stay curious and try and actually learn the material. So more so than the general
Actually
concepts.
learn the material. I
Yeah,
love it.
actually learn the material. I think there's a couple different ways you can approach school. One way is to kind of optimize for your grades. And obviously, a lot of students cheat and try and get by and get good grades so that their resume looks impressive so they can get a job and continue to play that game. And I think if you think about your career from a long term perspective, you're much better off, even if you don't get as good of grades, just actually learning. I think having a super high GPA is kind of proving you don't need that to get your foot in the door. So if you're really learning the material and then you start to reach out to people who are a few steps ahead of you in their career, and like you're genuinely interested in learning, a lot of people are going to be helpful to you, and you'll just get your foot in the door and be able to build from there. And I think students that actually prioritize learning will have a big leg up. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but I think, a lot of students aren't really trying to take in the material or follow their curiosity.
It's like, I believe that 100%. Yeah. It's so funny. That's like advice that's hiding in plain sight, right? Like, you're like,
Yeah.
duh. But then I could totally see how, if you just think back to students and what are they thinking? What are they trying to do? They're just trying to get through that class and trying to get a good grade.
Yeah.
And that's probably the difference. Even when you're choosing your own class, you don't choose the material, you don't choose the teacher, and you still have to deal with it. So yeah, lose yourself in the material.
Yeah. 100%.
I'm in masters right now, like a master's program at night. And so it's one of those ones where I am a student still at this moment, not
Wow.
like we're not all students in life, but like all the more reason I think I could resonate with that and other people could too. Cool. And so, Iron Margin, what do we do? Like, what's this problem? Why is there a problem out there? How come we need you to solve it?
Very good question. And the reason why I started the company goes back to my personal experience being on the brand side. So I had a couple roles. One was a VP of Ops role for a commercial print company. The other was an operations manager role for a gym equipment company. And at the gym equipment company specifically, we had onboarded 8 fulfillment centers in the span of 1 year. And the reason for that is we had big and bulky products. Our hero SKU was 122 pounds. And so because of that, we needed to have multiple fulfillment centers to be able to ship things affordably. And we also expanded internationally. So we had a 3PL in Europe, one in United Kingdom, one in Australia as well. So it was basically a jam-packed year where I got to learn a lot about fulfillment centers, learn about the rate cards that they're offering you. I made some mistakes for sure where, I'm learning things like, oh, hey, sometimes the pricing that was presented doesn't actually match up with the invoices that we received. And I realized that the kind of markup game and the rate cards that we're receiving, a lot of times it's not obvious to even an operations manager, how it works. I think the industry's kind of a black box in a lot of ways. And, I didn't even know all the options that were available to us at the time. And so I think there's an education gap that exists. And so what I'm trying to do with Iron Margin is we basically look holistically at a brand's shipping profile. So what shippers are they using? How do their rates compare to other people at a similar size and scale and pickup location and all that kind of stuff? And we take in this information and we try and help them save money on shipping without compromising performance. So one thing that we're doing is, we're getting them access to better shipping rates, but we're also helping them onboard, help making sure that they're able to fit this in nicely with their existing software and then actually, check the tracking. So if we onboard a new carrier, we're going to actually, make sure do a conservative test where maybe for a day we are using the new carrier and we see and make sure, does the pricing match what we were promised? And number two, is the performance acceptable? And make sure there's no customer complaints. And then if you're able to do that, then you can save yourself a ton of money on shipping. And I think that's, to be more profitable, you can put that money right back into your growth vectors like product, marketing, hiring new people, and all that kind of stuff.
Cost structure, overhead, insurance. I feel like everyone's in the squeeze right now. So there was one broker that left a firm. He started his own, and it was part brokerage and part like consultancy.
Yeah,
And it was Profit Recovery Partners. And I was like, love that. Profit
yeah,
recovery. Like it's out there and you lost it. Like you just have to identify like some of the leakage and yeah, just to have like a business surrounded around like that helps people do like there's no huge extra change, right? They already
definitely.
have it set up. They just have to figure it out.
Well, it's a really good point because there's a lot of different areas I could have chosen to focus on to help companies save money, right? You could have focused on manufacturing, could have focused on freight. The reason why I focused on last mile shipping is because I think the majority of brands there have a lot of meat left on the bone. There's a lot of room to save. And to actually make a change is not as disruptive to your supply chain. So if you imagine like some manufacturing changes that you might make, that's a lot bigger of a project than changing or modifying your last mile shipping. So I viewed it as the category where it's like the highest ROI use of your time. So if a brand is looking to cut their cost of goods sold, I recommend starting with shipping. And then obviously there's other areas as well, but it's a great area to start your
Be the
focus.
first lever, don't be the
Yeah.
last lever. Right. I love
Yeah.
that. Just for a juicy question that you brought up is the industry's a black box. What's up with that? Why is it like that? What's the challenges?
Yeah, well, it all comes down to incentives. So I really try and think of every player in the industry and what their incentives are. So if you think about the shipping carriers, their incentive is to ship product to residences as cheaply as possible and charge as much as possible. Warehouses want to make as much shipping markup as possible if they're in a middleman situation between the shipping carrier and the brands. And then brands want to be as profitable as possible as well. So if you think about the brand's incentive compared to the 3PL and the shipper's incentives, they're opposite each other. And because of that, a lot of times the shippers and the 3PLs won't share transparently what is their profit margin. They might not give you all the data that you need to really understand your costs. You really want to find a 3PL partner, or if you're running your own warehouse, you want to find shippers who, or 3PLs who are going to be kind of more transparent with you. They're going to, they deserve to make profit on the service that they're offering, but making sure that it's not excessive and that you're keeping them honest so that everybody can win at the end of the day. So really just thinking about the incentives. That's why it's a black box, because I think brands don't get the data access that they need to make informed decisions.
And they could if they wanted to. It's out there.
Yeah, it's just about asking the right questions.
Yeah. So people don't volunteer margin.
Right.
So you came up with this DTC playbook. So I figure that's a great way of making entry level for people to understand kind of what the challenge is and how you can help them with it.
Right.
Can you go over the playbook a little bit? I figure that's something that's
Definitely.
like a great framework for people just to have like, where do I start?
For sure. Yeah, so, I kind of wrote up this document that just kind of outlines everything that I would do to save on shipping costs, whether you work with me or not. So if you're a brand, the first thing that you're going to want to do is actually
This is the
understand.
difference between knowledge and implementation,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So the knowledge
100%.
can be out there, but yeah, how are we gonna go walk the path?
That's true. Yeah, I totally believe in I don't keep any secrets with anybody. I share kind of exactly what I do, and because I know that the implementation is the hard part. But step one of that process is actually understanding.
The direct to consumer shipping playbook, and then starting with knowing your numbers. Like, how do we get started with that?
Definitely. Yeah. So, like I said, just wrote up, a document that explains exactly how I would approach decreasing your shipping costs. The first step is knowing your numbers, which a lot of times is not easy if you don't have access to the data. So, you're going to want to find out.
And who are you working with when you're doing this, Keon? This isn't like a VP of ops. This would
Right.
be someone that's like a logistics manager or in charge of shipping.
So it depends on the company size. A lot of times if I'm working with brands that are doing less than 10
Or it's
million
the
in
founder.
revenue. Yeah, right. The founder's often involved, or, someone in logistics. So some of the bigger companies that I work with, I'm talking directly with their logistics person. For smaller companies, with their founders.
Okay.
Yep.
So they have their numbers, right? It's just more of like interpreting what they already have and then thinking through what they're missing and making the requests.
Well, so, I basically ask them to kind of share, some data, like for every shipment they make, what's their origin zip, destination zip, how much did it cost them to ship it, what shipper did they use, questions like this. And I'd say for some brands out there, it's easier to get the data than others. And, there's some percentage of brands out there that actually don't know what they're paying for shipping. And then there's others who know exactly what their costs are. So it's a non-trivial first step to make sure you actually know what your average cost is. And a lot of times, because you're dealing with different zones and because costs are changing over time, brands can lose sight on what their actual costs are.
On their customer demand changes from where it is, and yesterday's demand's not the same as tomorrow's demand.
Yeah.
What are some metrics or things you see that, like, for you, like, raise the red flag of like, oh, there's a thread I need to pull on when you look at the numbers?
Yeah. So if I'm seeing an average cost at a certain weight, so let's say someone is shipping supplements, right? And everything's under 2 pounds, everything that ships under 2 pounds. If I see a certain dollar amount, let's say like $9 or $10 for a brand that's doing decent volume, that's immediately going to jump out as a red flag to me, just because I've done enough of these audits to know if somebody's being overcharged for what they're actually able to get.
Yeah. I love when you've seen it enough times where just like you could just tell right off the bat, you're like, nope, this, that,
Yeah.
the other. You had a next on your list for your playbook was exploring partnerships. So that's you got to know your numbers, know what you're dealing with, know what you already have, and then this is starting to think about like who else can help you,
Hmm.
who else can serve, and like what's that look like?
Definitely. Yeah. When I started out in supply chain, I didn't know any last mile shippers existed outside of FedEx, UPS, and USPS.
Yep.
So I'm
Who you see
naturally
on the
limited.
street?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't know what you're looking for.
And I also didn't know how to approach them. I didn't have direct contacts with them for certain company sizes. It's hard to know how to even approach them or what to say and how to make sure that leveraging your story and your opportunity to them in the right way. So I just kind of share who are the right options out there. So there's probably like 10 to 15 really solid last mile delivery providers across the US, and they all have different specialties. Some are really good at bigger and bulkier shipments, others are better at lightweight shipments. And so they all have their place. And just knowing who's out there and just starting conversations with them is a guaranteed way to at least get, a proposal that's better than what you already have.
As a little guy, you can still get some leverage, or is that more like based on the economy and just like if like things are soft?
It's a good question. If you're a really small brand, the best thing you could do is, if you're a small Shopify brand, there's a lot of these apps out there called like ShipStation or Shippo. Basically, you get to piggyback off of this kind of group volume out of the box. So these days, compared to 10 years ago, smaller brands are probably better off and able to get better shipping prices. Then as you start to grow into a small and medium brand, you do start to have some leverage, especially if you have a good growth story. I think the shippers want to establish relationships with brands that are growing. So I would say it really is case by case, but even small brands can, like I've seen brands that are 3 times smaller do better than brands 3 times their size in terms of shippings. It's definitely possible.
Yeah, it's the brands that have Keyan and the ones that don't.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I'll audit somebody and they've done an extremely good job for their size. So it's a mixed bag.
You give them a little round of applause and keep
Definitely.
moving.
Yeah, no, for sure. If I audit somebody, it's pretty rare, but there's been a few cases where they're all set and they're doing great and they should just focus on other areas of their business. If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. And for them, it's great to get that reassurance that, they're actually strong in that category.
Yeah. Don't screw up a good thing is what I was once told.
Yeah, agreed.
Choosing software partners. That's next. Why is that next? They wouldn't have one. It's to get a better one. This is just part of like the growth phase.
Yeah, I think when you're small, you're going to want to use what's most kind of lightweight. So a lot of these apps out there on the Shopify store are great for you to start. Just be able to print labels easily, be able to get the best price, and that's it. And if you're a founder in that growth stage, it's probably all you really need to do. And then on the more complex side, once you start to have multiple warehouses and you have SKUs that range from 1 pound to 150 pounds, and you maybe work with 4 or 5 different shipping carriers. All these things add complexity to your profile. And so at that point in time, you're going to want a more sophisticated software partner. And at the very highest level, you'll want to onboard some sort of ERP system. NetSuite is like the most famous like legacy player, but there's a lot of startups who are getting in the space and offering really good solutions to brands out there.
And you help people pick that. You have like your own vetting process.
Yeah, it's not what I do like as a core service, but since I want them to be onboarded and smooth with their shipping, I do have, experience with that and can make recommendations that are best for them.
Yeah. I got to imagine that's just part of the process,
It is, yes,
right? So you just like, you can't avoid it or you gotta cross that bridge.
definitely. So even after you've shown someone, hey, I could save you thousands of dollars a month, onboarding still has friction. And there's certain softwares that make it very, very easy and others that make it more complex. So it can take anywhere from 2 days, literally 2 days on the lighter end, and on the heavier end, it could take months, 1 or 2 months.
ERPs are where smiles go into frowns
Yeah.
oftentimes.
Yeah. It's not fun.
So you found who your carriers are going to be. You got some leverage. Maybe you
Mhm.
rode the coattails of a larger provider, or you've grown enough to have it on your own. You got your software in place, and then we got carrier integration, and probably where the excitement starts, where you're like, okay, let's get it going. What's that seems like with that excitement, people try and flip the switch, and voila, things are moving. What's with integration? What are some of the challenges, or like where do you take that part of the process next?
Yeah. I can share a mistake kind of story that I've made and that I've learned from to show that once you've gotten the savings, it's not over. So when you onboard a new shipper, you have to think about things like what time of day are they going to pick up? Where are they going to inject into? And what that tracking experience for the customer is going to be like. So these are all things that can go wrong. It's just more surface area for things to go wrong.
Well put.
Yeah, it's just, you know, one story of a mistake I've made in the past is, we've gotten really good rates for a customer. Instead of doing a test period, which I highly encourage, where you test maybe 50 orders, we went straight.
And that's normal. They'll do that. That's
I think it's been normal for me. I think that's something that I've kind of demanded based on personal experience. I know how important it is to test. And if you think about it from the carrier's perspective, a lot of times they're happy to do the test, especially if they have confidence in their service, because if things go well, they're just one step away from having all the volume. So, but a lot can go wrong. A lot can go wrong if you ship a bunch at once without thoroughly testing and there's delays or poor tracking experience, then the brand is going to suffer with a reputation hit. They're going to have hundreds of customers who are angry potentially and asking, blowing up their customer service saying, "Hey, where's my package? Hey, my tracking number hasn't had an update in 4 to 5 days." So you really just want to make sure all this stuff is in place before like just turning on the throttle all the way.
You'll love it, Keon. Since we do leasing, we'll have our sign, name, number, firm outside projects like distribution centers. And we'll get these calls, probably one a month or two, that'll be like, I got this package from so and so. I can't figure out how to return it. I found your name and number,
Yeah,
looking up their address, and they're just shooting in the dark, trying to figure it out. I wish I could help them. That's like not even close to what I know what to like, who to direct someone to, but it's one of those that like someone didn't think about that part of it, or they didn't test that part of it. And then of course the customer's not happy when they've wasted their time and they've reached another dead end and they're like, you know, starting to fume.
definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of like good returns software now in the space, especially in the last few years that, it's all about customer experience at the end of the day, making it as easy as possible for them to replace an item, return an item, make a change to the address while it's in transit. You want them to be able to have full control there to keep them happy.
You have stage 5 is get married. It says commit.
Yeah.
So commit. You've done your trial. You figured out like some of the bumps. And then is that more just like now that the trial's over, like flip the switch and go full volume?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of a sweet spot of how many carriers you should have. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of brands out there who might only use one shipping carrier, but there's, 10 to 15 solid options out there. So I think the sweet spot is probably distributing your volume across 2 to 3 carriers. And so when it comes to commitment, if you've talked to multiple carriers, once you found the 2 or 3 that are the best fit, let's say you have one that specializes in your lightweight stuff. They're really competitive from anything less than 5 pounds. Let's say you also have heavier SKUs. There's going to be a different carrier who's best fit for that. I would say once you found the right partner for each of those areas of your business, that commitment is an important step so that you can start to build a long-term partnership. have a great point of contact with the carrier and just think about ways that you can improve and really go deep into the questions, like I said. So I think it's not advantageous to just continuously switch and try and kind of burn bridges with your partners.
Yeah, we're not in the bridge burning business.
No.
Yeah, I feel like the more you can go deep and the more you can have that true like strategic partnership and like a relationship where like my stuff is your stuff, right? Like that's the care that you're looking for. I got some rapid fire for you, Keon. These are, you posted this on LinkedIn to the world, so I figure you could probably speak to it. 3PL red flags. You seen some? What are some that like stand out to you?
Yeah, I would say not having a clean facility is a red flag. So if you're exploring 3PLs and you're at the final stage, that's a pretty big red flag. If you go into the facility and you don't get a good sense of their operation and don't feel confident when you walk into their building, I would say that's a red flag. Second red flag, which
We
is,
see some of those messy ones
yeah,
too, where it's like a trash dump of like cardboard and shipping tape, and it's just like piles, and you're like, okay, this isn't good.
yeah, I think if you're down to your final two or three, you visit all two or three, cleanliness is definitely a good thing to look out for.
Yeah, you had a second one?
I do. This one's pretty rare, but I've had 3PLs offer me like a profit-based sort of rate card. So what's industry standard is you give me a rate for how much it costs to pick, how much it costs to pack, what storage will be. I've had 3PLs who have, because they have access to the freight data, they know what we're selling at retail and they also know what our cost of goods sold is. So they're basically asking for a percentage of that, um, a percentage based model, which is pretty ridiculous, I would say. I think that's a red flag. It's basically a 3PL looking and saying, "Oh, you're selling your product for $500 and it only costs you $100 to make. Therefore, we're going to take a percentage on that $400 of profit that you make per unit." It just doesn't make any sense and doesn't accurately value the services that they're providing.
Or in line incentives?
No.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great one. That's like contractors doing a project on your house or building out some office space, and you're like knowing what the profit is, or if they're like open book bidding, and like yeah, every segment has its own racket, I suppose. So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to know those. I had a hidden WMS costs. They're out there, and they can lead to huge errors that can be super costly. What are some of those? What's that look like?
Yeah, so on VMS systems, typically they're charging in a couple ways. So the first way is going to be just like a software monthly subscription. I would just say that, most of the companies out there have different tiers and you'll want to make sure that you're you're using the tier that their incentive is to upsell you as much as possible. Just make sure you're only paying for the features that actually matter to your business. In a lot of cases, it could be really simple and you don't need all their complex features. And then a lot of UMSs will also make money by marking up your shipping labels. So it's just something to be aware of as well. If their prices are very competitive, then that's great. But if you feel like your shipping costs are kind of being sunk, then being able to use your own rates can definitely be helpful. So uh, it's not necessarily on your cost of goods sold line item, that software expense, but it's something you'll want to manage.
Yeah, I love that. Inventory planning, you're in the game of that a little bit. So one I had seen was like a balancing analytics with instinct and agility. I gotta imagine that's just sometimes it shows up in the numbers. Sometimes you get that sixth sense of like adjustments need to be made. Like how do you balance that?
Definitely. Yeah, inventory planning is, I think, the hardest thing for direct to consumer brands to manage. First and most
Because they're
important,
making a good product. They got to get a product market fit. They got to get awareness. They got to get it selling. I could totally see this be like, when that all works, you've now created this problem for yourself.
right. Well, you can over order or under order, and there's different strategies to manage that. At baseline level, you need to make sure you know how much inventory do you currently have on hand and what your historical sales data is. There's a lot of other steps involved, but if a company makes a mistake, which we often do when you inventory plan, it's not uncommon to overorder too many units or underorder. You're just going to want to make sure that whatever decision you make, you're kind of running analysis where you see what's the worst thing that can happen. So if I order 1,000 units of this SKU, what's the lowest possible amount of sales I can get? And am I comfortable incurring the cost of that storage sitting for longer? Am I comfortable with all the consequences that exist from that decision? And then also taking into account your upsides. You want to make sure you're leaving enough room for your best case scenario. It would suck if you got 5,000 sales on that unit within a month and you only had 1,000 units available. So you didn't fully capture the demand that existed. So I always like to say no knockout punches. Just make sure you're not ordering so much inventory that it puts your business at risk. It's one of the few areas where a brand can really like die if it's not managed well. So
Yeah, what like the telltale signs for us as you walk into the warehouse and when you see like inventory is now going in the staging area and they have to move product out of the way to get product from somewhere else and then it just mucks up like the whole flow, then it starts mucking up like outbound shipments and then that's sometimes temporary, sometimes it's like a sign of something greater. And so that's definitely something we're always looking at like what are those trends looking like or like how often is that happening? And does that mean it's time to go shopping for a new building?
mhm.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, Keon, you've been great. We're spending our time wisely. If I had one or two last questions, I would just ask you about themes, the future. When you just think of like challenges people are dealing with now, like we had the whole tariff madness. Things have been a little slow in a lot of segments I have seen in tenants and like their growth. And when you just think of like what some of the things you're excited about for like next year and for like the future, what are things you see in like the pipeline that are going to be helpful for these people that you work with, for you personally? I always love thinking about like what you're seeing out there and what you think is going to be impactful.
Yeah, I would say this is a little broad. It's not necessarily brand focused, but I'm excited for the technology in the logistics space. I think self-driving vehicles is going to be interesting, how that can reduce costs for everyone involved. I've been watching YouTube videos of like Amazon and FedEx drivers who have these like POV glasses on and they're recording their paths, and I'm thinking of all the ways that you could potentially shave seconds off of each delivery, and I think that's just going to drive down the costs in the market. I think at a broad level, there's good, healthy competition in the shipping space. And so I think brands are benefiting from lower shipping costs over the next 5 years, I would expect. And from a broader perspective, taking into account things like tariffs, I think it's really hard to predict how that will go and how the policies will change. So I think for brands to have some exposure internationally is good, just to hedge risk a little bit. So I could see a lot of brands who are only selling in the US now start to take other markets seriously, like Europe, Canada, Australia, United Kingdom. And then in the long term, probably other markets will emerge as well. So yeah, I mean there's exciting things going on for us logistics nerds out here.
Yeah, I've heard a little bit more and more of that, of like taking other markets and like having more of that like a focus if you have not already expanded or if you have that like a natural adjacency. Yeah, I love that. And we got to get some glasses for you. Yeah, you're going to have the Meta Ray-Ban soon and you'll be doing your work. Yeah.
I like them. I think I haven't actually worn them, but I have friends recording pretty good looking videos on them, and I think if you for like a logistics truck driver to wear, I think there's some concerns about, battery life and safety and, you know, monitoring of, recording without permission, all that kind of stuff. But I think, I've been watching these videos of the drivers and they're constantly looking at their phone. They have to use their phone to scan packages. And there's tons of seconds being added up so I think it's going to be a good application.
Yeah, I love that. reminds me of Bezos saying that he's even trying to shave seconds off how he brushes his teeth.
That's
He,
crazy.
he's that deep in the game. Yeah.
That's insane.
Keon, thanks for spending the time. I hope that was helpful. I know people definitely like have questions for you, and this is a need that's not going away. Like it's, if anything, more and more important for people. And I hear a lot of people struggle with cost structure and like complexity. And so with e-commerce continuing to saturate, like this is a big challenge that like a lot of people need help with. So I appreciate you spending time with us today.
Yeah, no, it was really great talking. Let's stay in touch and definitely remember that, e-commerce is still, I think, only like 20% of all sales. So the 3PL space is even broader than that. I'm only really dealing with a small slice of the pie, but I really appreciate the time. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, we'll go get a bigger slice. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Go. See you later. Have a good one.
All right. Bye,
Bye
Justin.
bye.